Hello, everybody. My name is Nicolaas van Wyk. I'm the CEO of the Chartered Institute for Business Accountants and also editor for Accounting Weekly. Accounting Weekly is a publication of CIBA. We cover everything accounting and tax, not only in South Africa, but globally. We want to make sure that our accountants in South Africa knows about international developments. It's not, you might be a tax practitioner and you might be struggling with SARS and e-filing, but if you see how the IRS is still largely manual in how they engage with taxpayers and tax practitioners, then you kind of feel very blessed to working with an efficient SARS. So the world is not the same. It's different in each country. There's struggles and challenges, and I think we can learn from each other. We also cover successful firms, and today I'm very honored to engage with Olivier Barbeau. He's the managing partner of Moores in Johannesburg and also the deputy chairman of Moores South Africa. I do follow him on LinkedIn, and I can really recommend that you do. He's one of those people that post stuff that's really interesting, helping you in your career and informing you of developments in the profession, whether it's things that the IRBA is doing or government can improve. I think they're a very proactive firm and somebody that CIBA definitely wants to work with in future. I think also and one of the publications that caught my eye recently by following Olivier Barbeau on his LinkedIn profile was a economic overview that they did for businesses. Um, I can really recommend for smaller firms to read that, gain access to it, and set up your practice. So welcome, Oliver, to another session of Accounting Weekly.
Nicholas, thank you very much for the kind invitation and the very kind words in introduction. Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
So in his role as the managing partner of Moores, I'm just going to read a quick bio. He's a chartered accountant involved in many, many things: valuations, dispute resolution, due diligence, M&A. So it's really one of those firms that everybody aspires to become one day. When you set out, everybody wants to be like a full house, full service offering firm.
The good news is that it doesn't happen overnight, but
No,
it's nice to be able to
grow
service offering.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's kind of a struggle if you start. I started my practice I tried starting a practice, and those first 3, 4, 5 years is really, really difficult. But the nice thing about running a practice is you discover so many new business ideas, learn new systems, new processes. So it's really a nice career choice. We can talk maybe a little bit about that later on, about making accounting a career choice, because it's not really what students think. It's much more engaging. You really can learn to understand business when you enter the accounting field.
Yeah, I think it's probably a profession that's misunderstood by a lot of people. Like there's that conception of grey-suited accountants and accounting is boring. But accounting is fundamentally the business language. And if you delve into that quite deeply, it opens up so many different doors. And, within our practice, it's not just audit that's there. There's audit, there's advisory, there's tax, there's structuring, all sorts of things that different people can go and specialize into. And, accounting is not a young person's game anymore. I mean, not an old person's game anymore. It's now a young person's game. It's changing, so quickly. Like you said right in your intro, technology is right at the front of it nowadays.
I agree with you.
South Africa, CASAs are highly regarded, and the skill sets that come from being with a CASA still put you in great stead for business.
Yeah, and also for a wide variety of businesses. Even if you decide not to go into an accounting firm, if you did study your BCom and you're a member of a professional body, then it gives you such a solid base to start your career. And then also the benefit of auditing is that systematic thinking, which everybody needs. It's not only in auditing; it makes you think deeply about things and controls. But I think let's go to our main focus, and that was your recent research paper. Just as we start, maybe give us an overview of Moores. I think many people would be interested in how you started and how you ended up working and leading Moores, and then also the research paper that you recently did. Just a brief overview.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So Moore, some people might know it as Moore Stevens. Moore Stevens first came into the country in 2003, and Moore Johannesburg, along with the Cape Town office, were the first offices to bring the brand into the country all those years ago. We're globally a top 10 audit and advisory practice. And in South Africa, we would equally be in the top 10. The last rankings put us in at position 8 in terms of revenue nationwide, or in terms of staff count. So something along those lines. It's a multidisciplinary practice. It's, as you touched on earlier, and it's audit and accounting, advisory, corporate finance, tax, compliance and secretarial, debt advisory, M&A work, multidisciplinary. And our niche area is to work with entrepreneurial businesses that are tightly held, where a small group of people are controlling those activities. So who would that be? Generally, probably the bottom third of the JSE, and the large successful owner-managed businesses. Many of them are substantially bigger than their JSE counterparts. So that's a more target clients. In the Joburg office, we're a staff complement of almost 300 across the different service lines.
Yeah, and thank you for that intro. And then also about the research paper, is it something that you do annually? Is it intermittent? And
Yeah.
and why did you release that paper, and who's the target audience?
Yeah, so something that we put out quite regularly. We put out a few different reports on a regular basis. Being an entrepreneur is a lonely space, and we want to be there to be able to support entrepreneurs on their journey and give them a little bit of insight into things that are probably they should be aware of when they're doing business in Southern Africa or in South Africa. So we put out these research papers and guides, things that people need to be thinking about. Maybe it's taxation, maybe it's different laws, amendments to laws, maybe it's BE legislation, maybe it's competition law, and help these entrepreneurs navigate that journey, because running your own business can be lonely. You need a sounding board. And so we hope that by putting out these research papers, we give the entrepreneurs a little bit of insight, and maybe it's a starting point for a conversation. They read something in it and they think, oh, I should reach out to my accountant who could give me some expert advice on something that's been bothering me within my business. And so it might be the one I think you read was doing business in South Africa, but we would have tax guides, we would have investing offshore, we would have managing your trusts, and or it could be things like estate planning, the things that worry entrepreneurs in their journey.
Yeah, it's quite daunting. If you are an entrepreneur, you might have a good idea, but that's just like 10% of the whole issue. Compliance is a big thing. Managing staff, I think, is a really even more complex than complying with legislation. And you really need a firm that supports your development. I can't see any business being run without regularly be in contact with their accountant. And as you said, as your firm offers such a wide variety of services, it's quite a necessity. And you mentioned overseas clients or businesses that want to enter South Africa. As an international firm, how do you experience the interest in South Africa? I recently saw a stat from Kudera, which is also an economic company, economist company that I follow on LinkedIn, a really great resource, about the declining number of companies being registered with the CIPC. So it's a very interesting graph. You can see as soon as there is an economic crisis somewhere, like in 2008, there's a massive drop in new company registrations. Then for a time it goes very well, and then there was COVID, and then there's an immediate drop again. And we're kind of on a downward spiral. I know there's many positive signs from the GNU. Today I read about the CEOs, about 105 of them, signing again, committing resources to South Africa. And that's obviously following the Business Unity South Africa and SACCI's commitments to supporting the GNU. How is all this playing out from an international perspective and attracting foreign interest into South Africa?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Moore is globally represented, and we have, through our corporate finance and our advisory team, really a barometer on what the sentiment is for doing business in South Africa. South Africa sits at the tip of the African continent, but we have outstanding institutions here. We have first world legislation around companies and around taxes and employee rights. And as a foreigner coming in to try and navigate that, it can sometimes be quite daunting. And for a while, we saw a significant decline in interest of foreign nationals looking to set up business in South Africa. You touched on the decrease in company registrations. Equally, you could have mentioned the decrease in the number of entities that are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. It's been in decline for some time. It's of concern. But business is a fickle thing. It's driven by essentially two things, and that is fear and greed. And when business feels it is unwelcome and capital feels it's unwelcome, it goes elsewhere. It goes to jurisdictions where it thinks it can get an appropriate return and provide the return back to shareholders. And so that talks to the greed aspects of it and the fear aspects of it. And if equally, if there is a sentiment that they think that they are welcome, and they think that there is a profit to be derived by operating in a jurisdiction, it comes back rapidly. And sentiment in this country can sometimes be a fickle thing. So we are 100 days plus into the GNU, and I can tell you that without a shadow of a doubt, we have seen a marked increase in international interest coming back into the country. And our corporate finance teams have been busier than ever before, helping multinationals set up local subsidiaries. And you might say, well, that's quite quick off the back of an election that was just over 100 days ago. But that's how quickly things can turn. And so the sentiment for foreign nationals doing business in South Africa has turned. I think as a firm, we are relatively optimistic about what the GNU might be able to deliver over the next couple of years. But it talks to governance, it talks to credibility, and we're hopeful of that. And the opposite is also true. So pre-GNU, lots of South African businesses looking to set up operations outside of the borders of the country. And unsurprisingly, it's slowed down a little bit now. And I mean, even the Rand has been a good barometer of what business sentiment is like.
Yeah, I think sometimes politicians, other stakeholders forget that South Africa is a very small country in world affairs. Our contribution to global GDP is really so meager that you really need to attract foreign companies, millionaires, billionaires, and make it business friendly, because you need that spending, you need that development. And like you said, business can go anywhere. We recently at CIBA started a network of CFOs, the International CFO Alliance, and for the first time we're working now with CFO associations from Brazil to Mexico, Italy, France, Germany. And yeah, it is a competition for capital. I recently saw and posted something on my LinkedIn about where millionaires are going. And you can see that most millionaires, it seems, love the UAE. I'm sure it's not because of their own political system, but there has to be this safety and security and certainty. And then there's moving. Africa is losing millionaires. China is losing a lot of millionaires. So whatever the politics or reasons, they can move, and with them they take businesses, they take IP, they take opportunity. You wanted to say?
Yeah, capital is so mobile, and people don't understand how mobile it is. I saw a similar graphic to the one that you're referring to about where the millionaires are moving. So a lot of capital moving into the UAE. Dubai recently voted as one of the safest cities in the world. If you go there, you can see that the money is pouring in at a rate that's quite remarkable. And political alliances also play an important part in that, because the biggest losers of millionaires on that same graphic that I think you're referring to was all the BRICS countries, where people were moving out of the BRICS entities into other places where potentially the capital was more welcome.
Yeah, it's a scary number. I obviously, well, I suppose not obviously, but I try to make it obvious that I'm a big supporter of nuclear power. I know it's not something that we prepared to discuss on this conversation, but we mentioned the UAE, and I was just surprised. I saw that they just finished a nuclear power station, and it's going to build 40 terawatts. So it can deliver 40 terawatt of power. And then I looked at our own paper, policy document that being discussed now within the various ministries, and our effort is only to contribute another 2.5 megawatt to our grid. And I'm thinking to myself, the targets that we set ourselves is so ridiculously low. The same with, I think, GDP figures. Today, we saw that the government is saying they're aiming for a 3%. But there's an economist I read, and he says, listen, we need to stop playing games because we need like a 6 or 8% just to create the employment. I think 3% will just stabilize, but it won't get the millions out of poverty. And maybe there's something in South Africa that we're thinking too small, and that we're trying just to catch up, but just a repositioning of who we are in the world. And like you said, capital is frivolous. It can move. So there's things that you can do in your country to attract it. It doesn't have to be like a long-term major thing. I recently visited Italy as part of our CFO tour that we do annually for CFOs, and we visited a number of cities. One was Verona in Italy, amazing ancient city, but the number of tourists is just it's unbelievable. And then I read a statistic about, I think France, their population is 70 million, and they annually attract 100 million tourists. And I'm thinking, okay, so it's 100 million times 10,000 rand spent per tourist. That is in the trillions. So the economy is just driven. I'm thinking, how can we get more tourists? How can we do more this, that, and the other? Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you've hit it on the head. Sometimes it's important to dream big, and you've got to create this national vision of what it is that we want to be as a country. Tourism, you touch on that, is a particularly important sector of the economy in South Africa, and important for a few reasons. There are studies that we've done from a more global perspective around this hotel and hospitality sector that indicates that the spend in the tourism sector is the quickest generator of jobs out of all the sectors that we have within our economy. So imagine if as government we made it easy for people to come and visit us here, safe for people to come and visit us. We've got a beautiful and we've got an amazing country, and people would flock to come and visit South Africa. And the spin-off effects from job creation, infrastructure development, all of those things would be fundamentally change the economic trajectory of this country. So I love the idea of these big visions and dreaming into these big visions. Last year I had the opportunity to go and moderate a panel on African energy in Paris. And on the panel we spoke specifically about the energy mix within South Africa and Southern Africa. Very, very interesting. I mean, there's no doubt that nuclear's got to play a part in our energy mix going forward.
Yeah, I'm always thinking we shouldn't be thinking of just making power for South Africa. As a country, you position yourself, and then you have to say, listen, but how dominant can I be in my region? How dominant can I be in my continent? Because wealth is attracted to power. It's not only electricity power, but in the sense of a strong economy and a welcoming economy. So I'm always thinking, let's build nuclear for the whole of Africa. Let's just build a massive power plants this side, start selling the stuff. But it's like we're just focusing on our own small little problems, forgetting that there's a whole big world there that has more problems than us and that we can help fix. But that's now on our political economic side. I enjoy these conversations. Let's bring it back home to our practitioners. For professionals running their own businesses, what opportunities do you see in South Africa that they should focus on for growth in 2024 and moving into 2025, especially in key sectors?
So as I can give you some learnings from what we've done internally and what our focus areas are. So we're leaning very heavily into technology, and I think practitioners need to be thinking very carefully about what technology they're using. And we're in that state where it might end up being those that have adopted technology will continue to grow, and those that haven't will stagnate and potentially die. So you've got to lean into that, definitely. And then what have we got in abundance in this country? We've got human capital in abundance in this country. So how do we lean into that as a firm? And there it's about nurturing young talent, identifying young talent, giving them opportunities within our profession. And so actively developing that, I think that's important. And then the opposite side of that is to lean into sectors in the economy that would benefit off the back of that employment cycle, because that's what we've got in abundance, and we should be working hard on that. So things like hotel and hospitality become very important. The education sectors become important. And then, I mean, technology, without a doubt, you've got to be very alert to what's happening there. It's changing rapidly. I mean, you saw recently Xero acquired Sift Analytics. I think that was a super smart move. And that just talks to the use of AI and managing big data becoming very important, even for small business. Because think about who's using Xero as an accounting practice. It's not the big mega corporations. It's the smaller businesses that are using it. And I thought that was a very astute move by Xero.
Yeah, technology poses both opportunities and threats. I think as a small firm, you will always struggle in adopting new technology. It might be too expensive, but that's why I think small firms should make sure that they work with larger firms. They might get these big clients that they can't handle, but hooking up with a firm like Moores, I think definitely in the future there has to be a lot closer collaboration between firms. And AI, it can be an equalizer for a smaller firm. It allows you to do much more. But again, if you want to deploy AI in an industry, you need energy. I'm always amazed about the amount of energy needed to run a proper large data center and do all these AI calculations and give it these results. 2.5 megawatt won't give us a large data center, and we will just run out of energy to run our AI technology. So the world is moving so fast, and we've been blessed in South Africa to have these technology partners like the Xero, QuickBooks, DraftWorks. I think smaller firms heavily depend on them. And then you made a very important remark about following the money, or if I can summarize it or paraphrase it like that. I think sometimes smaller firms kind of stick with the sectors that they know, but there are growth areas, and maybe one should develop an interest, a network, a connection within growing sectors. If it's education, then go there and perform those services.
Yeah, I think the future of our profession is around specializing in different sectors. That's a trend that's developed not just here, but globally, where, for instance, you will find in the US, I travel there frequently and I visit various firms there, but how so super specialized you will find a firm in Boston, for instance, that only does one kind of audit, but they become absolute experts at it. And I suspect we will be no different.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that it's like fragmenting into little specialist areas. It makes the system very sensitive, very fragile. I'm thinking for any shocks, but that's a necessary development. And I would recommend all firms, small or big, like you said, if you can just travel a lot, go and meet those firms overseas, see what's developing. You learn so much. But speaking about traveling and networking, then I have a question here about the South African Development Community, the SADC, and the Africa Free Trade Agreements. So there are some strong developments in the EU and finally, after many years, the EU is now moving to get much more cooperation between African states, get trade going. There's amazing new roads and infrastructure being built in Africa. Specifically, I know Rwanda is developing very, very fast. So this presents a lot of opportunities for South African accountants. We have a big footprint in Namibia, and yeah, the oil and gas developments and the need for oil and gas accountants in Namibia is going to be huge. I don't think they'll have enough accountants to assist all the upstream and downstream businesses in Namibia with the wealth that's going to be created there. So how would a small firm benefit or should position themselves within this new opening up of trade in Africa?
Yeah, I think you beat me to the punch there. I was going to say, from a SADC region, I think we are ideally placed to see some good growth over the next couple of years. And we have the interest from the EU, and we have the interest from the US about making sure that as a region we're going to grow. And we've got neighbors on either side of us that have massive oil and gas fields that are going to be coming on stream in the coming years. And that's going to be so good for the region. It's going to generate additional jobs. It's going to have the spin-off through the economy. And I think any professional operating in this country has got to kind of raise their gaze a little bit and look a little bit of what's happening north of our borders within our neighbors. You don't have to restrict yourself just to from a South African perspective. A lot of South Africans have already become accustomed to having operations in South Africa and in Mauritius, for instance. And I suspect that there's going to be lots of South African Namibia stuff developing over the next few years, and equally the South Africa Mozambique stuff. That's also going to be a big corridor for business in the future. And the infrastructure spend that's got to come for these large projects is going to be significant. And who's going to benefit off a lot of that infrastructure spend? It's going to be many of the large South African businesses that have the capability of doing those infrastructure projects in other parts of Southern Africa. And they're going to have their roots here, and we're going to have to service them. We're going to be able to provide them with the services they need as they do that.
Yeah, it's kind of a very hopeful and futuristic view of Africa and the development that's going to happen. I think sometimes in South Africa we still kind of think that we're kind of isolated in the south, and we really need to have an expansionary mindset. There are many firms in Africa looking for partners. We have so much infrastructure and technology and support locally that if our local market might not be growing, then you get your firm overseas and into Africa and start networking. Something that I've been thinking about a lot, because obviously we're interested as a professional body in seeing our members be successful. And what our big message the last couple of months was connect with the business chamber, learn about businesses, put yourself out there, connect with them. Is there a case to be made for accountants to be more actively presented amongst business chambers and business communities and business forums? And why do you think some firms don't want to do that?
It's so important for accountants to go and connect with all of these business chambers, these other business forums that exist out there. The issue, I think, is that accountants are naturally not natural marketers. They don't find it comfortable to get into these forums and have conversations about what it is that they do. But they're so important. We've developed at Moore Johannesburg a German desk and a Francophone desk, because we see what's happening north of our borders, and both of those desks that are manned by French-speaking bodies and German-speaking bodies within our organization are actively involved in the French Chamber of Commerce in South Africa, or the German Chamber of Commerce in South Africa, and just the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce, in terms of meeting other business principles that are there. And it's often the first place that foreign businesses will come and make initial contact with that chamber. So I would encourage firms to go out and make contact with their local chambers. They will learn a lot through the process and make themselves available for opportunity. It's something we push quite hard within our practice.
That is so refreshing to hear. I'm also a board member of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I'm just amazed at how much engagement there is between our local chamber and chambers overseas from Vietnam, Turkey, China, the US, the Europe, Africa. It's like there's so much happening, but in all these meetings and forums, there's no accountant there that just participates or is on a working group of a chamber. So yeah, I think partly the route to success for firms is just get out there, and start supporting chambers, meet with them, and participate. But speaking about networking, for businesses looking to use offshore structures like those in Mauritius, what are the
Yes.
key benefits and potential risks, and how can they make sure they stay in compliance with both local and international regulations?
Such a great question. So we can get a little bit insular here in South Africa, and we only think about South African business, but there's a big bad world out there that we can go and explore. It's become quite popular for South African businesses to try and establish some sort of Mauritian structure. That's been an easy way to go and get. In fact, in many cases, Mauritius almost feels like the 10th province of South Africa. I have Mauritian nationality, so I travel back to the island on a regular basis. And when people come to speak to me about wanting to put in an offshore structure in place, the first question is always got to be why. What are you trying to achieve? What's the purpose of establishing an offshore structure? Because it's not for everybody. It's got to be fit for purpose, and it's got to be able to stand up to scrutiny, and it's got to be able to tick all the boxes from a business rationale perspective. And in many cases, one of the primary reasons for establishing structures in Mauritius would be to get a little bit of freedom from an international perspective from exchange control regulation, where you can bank in hard currency and trade in hard currency. But the devil's always in the detail with these things. You've got to make sure that you comply fully with local legislation, which is fairly onerous, and also with Mauritian legislation, which is also onerous, and make sure that you have a robust business case that'll stand up to scrutiny, that you have a real business that you're running from there. If you gone on the days where you have brass plate companies and shadow companies, that doesn't exist anymore. But there is a world that exists that has real global business, where you might have strong reasons to establish in other parts of the world.
I can really see that why smaller firms should contact your office and engage their clients. There's no way that a smaller firm can handle all of these complex issues. But it also doesn't mean that they shouldn't offer them. It's just working with bigger firms, I think,
Exactly.
especially with more and more compliance and more technology developments and expansion and new more business needs. I think really a small firm should much work with bigger firms. I think the path to that option is open. Then in closing, I enjoyed our conversation so much, and I think we can carry on for the whole day. But as our last question, we always ask our attendees or our people that we interview whether they could recommend a book that has influenced their perspective on business, governance, or leadership that you think our listeners would benefit from.
Yeah, so I'm an avid reader. I like to read different things. I like to read biographies in particular and different business books. I'm a big reader of Simon Sinek's books. I like his in particular. But the one that I read a few months ago that I think is relevant where we are in the world, and it's a book called Same as Ever by Morgan Housel. And that talks about this whole concept that change is always with us. And how do we navigate in a world that's perpetually changing? And as much as we see all these micro changes, when one extends your horizon and you think a lot longer, maybe those changes aren't as relevant as you think they are. There's an expression in French that goes, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose, which means the more things change, the more they stay exactly the same. And I would recommend it's a very easy read. It's a whole bunch of short little chapters that you could take a few minutes to read each chapter, and I think as a businessman, it'll give you a different perspective on how you manage risk.
That is the nice things about books. It's like a mentor that you can just have access to. It's like an outsized reference source. So small practitioners, they kind of in the trenches, but do make time to read. It's really helpful, expanding your own mindset and showing a new discoveries in a new world. Oliver, thank you so much for our being part of the podcast that we had for Accounting Weekly. The listeners, I'm sure, will enjoy this. It'll be made available in the next couple of days, and I'm sure we'll have much more discussions. It's interesting speaking with you, the wide travels that you have, the amount of reading that you do, and the insights. I'm definitely going to set up a follow-up podcast. Thank you very much for joining us today for Accounting Weekly.
Thank you, Nicholas. It was my pleasure. I think we could have talked for a lot longer.
Thank you so much. And then we conclude.
What do our defining moments look like? Just like this moment right now. They look like pride after achieving that long sought-after goal. All the small victories along the way that didn't feel momentous until we saw them in the rearview mirror. They look like the courage it takes to take that first big step. All the times we fail and rise again. And without even knowing it, cultivating an inner strength that is contagious along the way. They look like the inspiration that comes from knowing that we are not alone. They look like the human relationships that give us wisdom beyond what data ever could. They look like the curiosity that comes from exploring, that allow us to create and contribute. They look like education that unlocks our full potential, using our knowledge for impact. They look like choosing our own definition of success, over hiding, over hustling, over pretending. They look like others showing up and recognizing our efforts after all the times we already showed up for ourselves. They look like being bold enough to be extraordinary. They look like you. Right now, right here. First, we help you see your defining moments. Then we help you seize them. We are the accounting body for everyone. We are the accounting body for you.